started, tell us a little bit about yourself before you decided to change careers into UX UI design. What had you been doing? Maybe like your educational background, like just your pre-UX life.
Yeah. So I like to say that I collect careers because I've switched. I think UX is my fourth career. It depends on how you count. So when I first went to college, right out of high school, I got a degree in math, and I was a math teacher, high school math teacher for 5 years. I absolutely hated it. I knew that I didn't want to be doing it after like 2, but I didn't know what to do next. And so I actually took one of those like career tests that I made my students take because they were like juniors in high school.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to take this. And so it told me industrial design. So I kind of like did a lot of research on industrial design. I taught for a couple more years trying to figure out if that's what I wanted to do. And then I went back to school for industrial design, which those of you that don't know what industrial design is, it's very similar to UX, but it's for physical products. So furniture, lamps, your water bottle, like any physical product is made is designed by an industrial designer. So I went back to school for that, got another bachelor's degree. And then when I graduated from industrial design school, I got a job at a museum, and I was doing a lot of exhibit stuff. So maintenance, kind of figuring out how to build interactive things at museums, doing exhibit design. And then I got laid off from that job and did some freelance exhibit work just around, I live in Denver, around Denver, kind of a bunch of museums here. Sick of freelance work. I'm not cut out for
it's not easy.
Work.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Yeah. And it's also like, I wasn't making enough money to live off of. I had to have a part-time job the whole time. Like, it just was not a good life balance. And it wasn't, I liked the work, but it was like too hard to sustain it. So I then got a job at a fintech company doing graphic design, essentially, for the marketing team. And kind of around the same time, my brother was in tech. He's a data scientist, and he was like, I think you would really like UX. And I had never really heard of it. I didn't know what it was. And he kind of put me in touch with a UX person at his work, just so I could ask a bunch of questions. And kind of while I was doing graphic design, I was doing a lot of research about UX. So I met with like anyone who would talk to me about UX, like friends of friends, had coffee with so many people to like learn what it was. And I would explain like kind of what my background was. And they would be like, you'd be a great UX designer. And like, you totally get it. You understand the process. Like, it's very similar to industrial design. But I started applying for jobs in UX, but I was not getting any traction because I had.
So how long did you do this like exploration? So from like when you heard, oh, you might be good at this, and then you talked to a bunch of people, how long did you talk to a bunch of people for? Was it like a month or like a year? Or
several years of like
several years? Okay.
Yeah, because it was like, I kind of around the same time I was like dating my now husband, and I was like, we got married. Like, there was a lot of other stuff in my life going on. And I had a baby. Like, I was like, I had a good job, and I was kind of focusing on like not my career, if that makes sense.
So it was like kind of like hovering for a couple of years.
Like, kind of like, I knew this is what I wanted to do. And every once in a while I'd apply for a job and like, of course, not get anywhere because my portfolio was all industrial design, museum exhibit stuff. I didn't have any UX digital stuff in my portfolio. So so like my daughter was a year old, and I was like so bored at my job, and I was like, I need to just do it. And I had tried to sort of learn it on my own, but I have ADD, and I like do not work well with no deadlines. So I just knew I needed to do some sort of program to get some portfolio pieces. I had a really good understanding of what UX was, but didn't know how to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So before you started a program, you said you applied to some jobs. Do you remember like how many jobs you applied to, and did you get any interviews like before you had the portfolio or anything?
No interviews. No, all just like the blanket rejection emails. And I didn't apply to a ton. It was like on a whim, I'd be like, I'm going to apply for some jobs today. And then I would just apply for a bunch. And, or I would apply at places where like people I had met, doing my like research work,
Right.
And they would be like, yeah, you don't really have the right stuff in your portfolio. And they would give me some feedback, which was helpful, but never got an interview for those. So
cool. So you decide like, all right, I know I need some structure. I know I need a program. What year was this? Like, what are we talking timeline wise?
End of 2020.
End of 2020. Okay, cool.
Beginning of 2021. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does your like research of programs look like? Like, what do you?
Lots of Google searching. Like I said, like I have a design background. I have industrial design. Like I knew that I just needed to get some portfolio pieces. So I was looking for the cheapest program. I was looking for a program that I could do on my own time because I had a 1-year-old at home and a full-time job. So there was no way anything was happening during the day or that I could go to a class and be gone in the evenings. Like I just, my husband is freelance. And so like his schedule's kind of all over the place. There was nothing I could do that would be like on Tuesday nights, I need to go do this. So that's kind of what I was looking for. And I wanted it to be done pretty quick. A lot of the programs I found were 6 months or a year part-time. I was like, I don't, and I have two bachelor's degrees. I wasn't going to like go get another one.
Because you'd essentially had done a second bachelor degree and then you had spent a couple years thinking about it. So I'm sure like at this point you're like, all right, it's been a couple years of me trying, right?
Yes, exactly. And also like, I think, having my daughter and I was almost 40 and I was like, I need to just do this because I know I'm going to be good at it. And
you had all the pieces. I mean, you have the perfect background for like when people say like, when we talk about Avocademy and success stories, people are like, people always have experience. And I feel like you are the person, your like profile is the profile of the person that has the most experience, even though it's not exact experience. Anybody with graphic design experience or industrial design experience is like the experience, right? Like that is the most experienced person we take through the program is somebody with your profile, your set of skills. So you're right to say like you would be good at it, right? Because like you had all the parts that like
and I had done success. And in museum world, like we do the whole design thinking process. Like we would set up like little tables in the lobby and like interview people to be like, what kind of exhibits do you want to see? Like we were doing user interviews, we were doing like all the things. And I also knew like if someone had given me a chance to do it, I would have learned on the job, but I just there. And so that was kind of
and not to like give up the rest of the story, but I feel like the fact where you're at now, right? Like the level of your job, and we'll get to it in a second, like really does go to show that if somebody would have given you that chance, you would have moved up pretty quickly because you kind of had all the right pieces. But before we jump into that, so you need a program, you start looking for programs, you shared you wanted something cheap and flexible and all of that. How did you was Avocademy the first program you did, or did you try like a free one? Did you do anything else? Like how did you hear about us?
No,
it's late 2020, we had been around for like 6 months. Like we hadn't been around for that
might have
long.
Been, let's see, I started Avocademy in July of 2021. So I probably was looking that spring. So it would have been early. It wasn't like, it would have been early 2021. I probably Googled it like several times, over the 3 years that I was looking, but like, I think Avocademy popped up in my Google search, or like comparing programs or some sort of along those lines. I'm not a TikTok person, so I know that's how a lot of people find out, but I'm over 40, so it was not an early adopter of TikTok, but so I found it that way. And I think I never tried any of the free programs. like I said, like I have ADHD. I know myself well enough to know that I can't do something totally self-paced. Like I
Right.
need
Yeah.
some check-ins and some deadlines and some of that along the way. But I also knew, right, like I said earlier, I didn't have the time to do a class.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the stuff you're describing is exactly like the problems that I set out to solve when I started the company, right? It was like, honestly, I was thinking about like the moms whose job is to take care of a child. They literally can't take time off work, like it's their child. And the affordability piece again too, right? Like you were super sure that this was for you, but there's a lot of people that have maybe the same situation but are not sure, and like that $24,000 commitment of one of the big programs is a lot to swallow and kind of like not doable for a
Yeah.
lot of people.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have been able to afford that. So if
Yeah.
if Avocademy wasn't there, I probably would have eventually tried one of the free programs. And
Yeah.
but yeah, it was like, this is perfect. And I think I messaged you or like set up like just
Yeah.
whatever, I forget what it's called, but to chat about the program. We talked and I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. But I was really sure, like I said, I was really sure I wanted to do UX. And it worked perfectly for my schedule. Like,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work.
So how long did you do, if you remember, because I know it was a while, but it was almost 2 years ago now, which is crazy. It feels like yesterday. How long did it take you to finish foundations at the time?
I remember exactly because I started the 4th of July.
Okay. Yeah.
It was an easier date to remember. And then I finished on my birthday. So like end of September.
Okay, cool.
So it took me like 10 weeks, I think 10 or 11 weeks.
Nice. Yeah.
And at the time you guys were advertising 6 to 8 and I was like, oh no, I'm taking too long.
Yeah, we definitely changed. So now I'm gonna timestamp this video, April 10th, 2023. As of now, we offer 16 weeks of unlimited mentorship to really increase the flexibility. We saw that like the 6 to 8 week was creating a lot of stress in people. So now we offer 16 weeks. So you can take up to 16 weeks. Some people finish in 8, some people finish between 8 and 16. But you can take up to 16 weeks and kind of like figure out the timeline in that period. And we have, I mean, things have changed a lot since you went through the program. We have all these tools for accountability and for timelines and for those kind of like self-imposed due dates to help people like you kind of move through the program. But that's great. You finished pretty quickly. Were we offering Career Jumpstart at the time?
Yeah,
we were.
I don't know if you were when I started, but by the time I finished, you were. And so I did Career Jumpstart after.
Yeah. How was your experience there? And it's so different than when you did it, but feel free to share.
Yeah. So for me, I was doing, so I had my portfolio piece from Foundations. It was about greeting cards. And then I still love that project. I like want to make that happen sometime. But and then I did so I was working in graphic design and marketing at a fintech company, and I was able to sort of like, about when I was finishing up Foundations, they were like, we need to redo our website. And I was like, I'll do it. And so I did that as part of as a project, and kind of worked with my boss and like marketing team, and like, so I had that project in my portfolio too. So I did Career Jumpstart, and I only did one project with Career Jumpstart because I had my work piece as well. Then so once I sort of finished up that one project is when I started applying for jobs.
Nice. What made you decide to go into CJ? Like, what was that? Did you at any point think like, oh, maybe I don't need to do that? Or, and feel free to be completely honest, but like, what was your...
I was a little iffy about it. I didn't know if I needed to. I know, it costs more money. But also I was like feeling, I was really feeling like ready to get a new job. And I knew that was sort of the quickest way to get there. So I knew I had the one project from Foundations, I had the one project from work, and I knew I really needed a third project in my portfolio. And I knew like the quickest way to get there. So and kind of weighed, like, talked over finances with my husband and like figured that out. And we're like, yeah, let's do this so that I can
Yeah.
get this new job and
Yeah.
be happier and make more money and all of the things. So
Yeah.
so that's kind of why I did it. And I know the pay structure has changed since I did it too. So I'm not sure but it was worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you mentioned something that kind of stands out to me, which is it's the quickest way to get a job, right? Like we tell people like you can do foundations, and by the end of foundations, at this point you've mostly learned everything you need to know, right? Like you've learned every tool in the toolbox that you may need to pull out at any point to solve a UX problem. And you can very much go out and find freelance work or free work yourself and do it. There's nothing like revolutionary that we do in CJ, right? It's really that structure, it's the support, it's the mentorship, it's somebody holding you accountable and being like, all right, like you said by this time we would be applying to jobs, like let's start applying to jobs.
Yeah, it was working with other people I knew would be
Correct,
helpful. Yeah, like I said, the quickest way to get there, and it was.
Yeah. So let's talk about your job search. Share a little bit. So you had like foundations project, you had your own project, you did one CJ. What did your job search look like? Anything that surprised you that was like harder or easier, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, for CJ was really helpful. Some things that were really helpful were like looking over my resume, some of the tools that you guys shared of like, resume checkers and things like that. Practice interviews were really helpful. Having a list of interview questions was super helpful. And I started applying for jobs like the end of October. So I finished foundations end of September, started applying for jobs end of October. So like I said, only did one project with CJ. And then I applied, it's like, what do they say? Spray it and pray it.
Spray and pray, yeah.
Well, like I applied for so many jobs for like a month, I think, so what is it, 40 a month or something that I was doing. And a lot of it Indeed or LinkedIn, that kind of stuff. But I actually found my job that I have now through the Denver UX Slack channel.
Yeah.
There's postings on that channel like every week, at least a couple every week. And I messaged the person that posted it and was like, hey, I'm interested in applying, like anything I should know. And he was like, your resume looks great, apply, put my name down. Yeah. So that was the first, I think that was the first interview I had, was this job. I had a few other interviews. I had a bunch of like screener calls and a few second interviews lined up, but where I work now, Vertifor, they moved really fast. And so by the time I was offered the position, I hadn't even had some of those like second calls.
Yeah. And you got like a level 2 job, right? If I remember correctly, like it wasn't even a junior role. It was more of like a mid-level type role. And I feel like I remember having a conversation with you where you were like a little iffy about it, but you were like, I can do this. And I was like, I think you're trying to convince me, but I feel like you're already convinced.
Yeah. I think I was just like surprised that when I applied, it said 3 to 5 years of experience. And I'm like, well, depending on how you look at it, I have 10, and so it was product designer 2 position. And here at Vertifor, we have product designer 1 is the lowest, and then PD2, and then senior, and then principal. So it's still kind of on the the scale, it's on the lower end, but it's mid-level. And when I got hired, they told me like, I know this is your first UX job, but you have so much design experience. I actually showed one of my museum projects in my portfolio review in my interview.
I remember,
they asked me to, because they were like, well, show some of the work that you've done. Like our VP of design is the first person I interviewed with. And she said, when you do your portfolio review, show one of your museum projects, because I want the other team members to see how your previous experience is related. And so
it's an easier sell, right? To figure out how to take your past experience. So that's awesome. So that was around what you started around October 2020.
I was offered the job mid-November. I started in the beginning of December.
Cool. So you went from July 4th to, right, like mid-November, you had that job. So it was
pretty
fast.
yeah.
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 Yeah. It's like four months from start to finish, which is, yeah, it's really fast.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So
I know that's unusual.
yeah. Yeah. So it's been a year and a half, right? A year and a half at your job. Tell us how it's been. How was it starting? Were you, was there like any imposter syndrome type stuff? Were you like good? Anything that surprised you, like versus what you expected and actually ended up happening?
Yeah. So my job is going great. I love it so much. And I think, I really lucked out because it was honestly the first job that got offered to me. So I probably would have taken it no matter what. But it's just been such a great team. I think that's one thing that I kind of felt in the interviews was like, our VP of design is awesome. And she's like, just a really like a champion of design in our company. And like it's hard to tell this from an interview, but like our design team has no ego. Like we have design reviews twice a week, and everyone, no matter what level they are, is like comfortable giving feedback. Everyone is comfortable asking for feedback. Like our principal designers are like, what do you guys think about this? And a designer one will be like, I don't know if that's like similar, I did something similar in this project, like maybe try this, like it's just like such a lovely team.
Yeah.
I think that's sometimes hard to find.
Yeah, and we see it. You've joined some of like the post CJ calls, right? Where some people are just like, oh, like low UX maturity, right? Like different companies have different things. So it's really great that like, the first job that you got offered, you accepted, and you're like in this really great, environment, which is probably why you've stayed there, for the year and a half and haven't.
Yeah, and I think like our company overall has pretty low UX maturity, but our design team is just really solid, and it helps. We have a VP of design that really champions our team and will stick up for us, in other places in the company. So and then today actually is like officially I have a promotion. So a few weeks ago I had my like yearly review. And it went great. And at the end, they were like, excited to tell you you're being promoted. So I am technically now, as of this morning, senior product designer on our team.
Amazing. Yeah. And that's what I was referring to, right? Like, I feel like you were so right when you were said, like, I have all the skills and all the parts, and really just needed some structure to like, be like, here, and here's how you get the job, right? Because it's about that portfolio, right? Like if you can just show that you have the skills, then you showed up to that interview and like killed it, got the job. But that's awesome. How does it feel to be like on the other side of it, right? Like you were talking about how much, you were like so bored at your job or you didn't like it. How does it feel now, kind of looking back, now? Is there anything you wish you would have done differently, maybe?
I wish I would have done it a lot sooner.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. I think I don't know. I think one thing, like I started industrial design partly because I've always been like a crafty person. Like I like to make things. I sew, like all my hobbies are like making.
Yeah, I see your
all my stuff back here. And like my murals that I paint on my walls, and like, and so industrial design was a good fit, but I didn't realize that like what I actually love about industrial design, and it took me a long time to figure this out, was the problem solving part, and like knowing what users need and like figuring that out. And like, that's all the stuff I love about UX. And so not having like the physical part, I didn't know if I would like that, but it's like just as satisfying to me, if that makes sense. But it took me a long time to sort of figure that out. I mean, it totally makes sense looking back. Like I was a math major.
You have the parts of the problem solving logic side of it, like that, and then the creativity, right? Like it doesn't need to be artistic, like the murals and that stuff, but like the ability to think differently. And, you know, typically if you're into the artistic type stuff, it means that you can think of things in different ways. So you do have the perfect mix for things. So that's awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to share before I ask you one last closing question?
No, I think, I wish I would have done it sooner, but I do think that it was really important for me to meet with people and talk about UX. Like, I think that knowing what it was going into it was super helpful. And like, I would encourage anyone to do that, like go on ADP list or, talk to people that like are like, just like talk to rando people, but like ask them first. But like, I think it is really helpful to hear sort of what do you do every day and like kind of a good understanding of if it's something you really want to do before you go for it.
Yeah, and not to plug us, but I'll share something that I just did. I just created to solve that problem, actually. We created an intro course that's 3 hours long, and it's $2.65, which is the price of guacamole at Chipotle. Nice. And the idea is that it tells you kind of like what the design process is, what the steps are, what are all the different types of roles in UX, which can mean a million things everywhere. And then what the tools are, computer requirements. So it's really meant to be like an introduction to what it could be if you jumped into it. So it's a lot more of like exploratory to see if it's for you. So if anyone's interested, I don't know how you're listening to this, but look somewhere for a link, and I'll link to that. But we see a lot of people reach out to past grads like you being like, I think this is for me, but I don't know. So we put that together really to help people like figure out if it's for them before they take the leap, which thankfully I feel like you knew like instantly, that it was for you. Cool. So my last question is, if you had to give someone, the folks listening, a piece of advice on changing career, like what would you tell them?
Go for it.
Yeah.
It's not too late. Like, I'm not gonna say I'm old, but like I'm 41 and like I'm so glad I changed. It's not too late, go for it. But it's also a lot of work. So make sure that it's something you really want to do. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's great. Super fair. Thank you for joining us here today. Really appreciate you sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me.